Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be brief. I know everybody's probably starving by now. So I'm the user program administrator here at the CFN. You've heard this morning from Emilio and from Jay about the CFN, what we do here, and what capabilities and what instruments we have that are available to users. So I'm going to talk a little bit of how you can get your hands on these tools, how you can access the tools. So I'm going to talk about the different modes of user access, about our proposal process, about safety, which is really important here. We cannot emphasize that enough. How you can access the labs, and what your user responsibilities are, what we expect from you as users at the CFN. So there are three different modes of user access. The general user, which is the major mode of access here at the CFN. It can either be non-proprietary, which is free at no cost to you. You have access to these wonderful tools and to our staff's expertise at no cost. And the proprietary mode, which we charge full cost recovery. We also have what we call rapid access. I will talk a little bit about that in the next slide. And we have what we call partner users. These are individuals or groups that carry out research at the CFN, and then they enhance our capabilities here. So rapid access is for time-critical, high-impact type work. This is at the discretion of the CFN director, so he approves all of the rapid access proposals. And you have to provide justification as to why you need access to the tools right away. You can't say that I need to get there right away. You have an example of a good justification would be, I'm presenting a paper at a conference in 2 months, I need some data or I need some images that can support my paper, or I'm writing a proposal that's due to, let's say, NSF in a couple of months, and I need to get some data in order to give a meaningful proposal. So those are the kinds of justifications that we are looking for rapid access. I have to say that not all rapid access proposals get approved. It is also dependent on the availability of the tools that we have. Rapid access proposals are typically submitted outside of our fixed calls. We have fixed deadlines for general users. So you can see when they submit these rapid access proposals, some of the general user proposals have already been allocated or scheduled. So depending on the availability of the tools, and that's actually the first, it doesn't even go to Emilio for review. If the facility says we can't accommodate it, then it doesn't even go that far. So we encourage you to contact the facility first to make sure that those tools are available, so you don't waste your time submitting the proposal. It is a one-time privilege. Rapid access, you cannot submit rapid access proposals back to back. We do tell you when we approve your rapid access proposals that if you need to continue your time beyond the limited access that you're given, that you have to submit a general user proposal for external review. So that's the limitations on the rapid access. It just allows you to get in, and do your work. And if you need more time, you need to submit a general user proposal. So how do you go about submitting a proposal? We actually have an online proposal form. I provide the link here. You create an account and you fill out the form and then submit. After the submission, your proposals are reviewed internally here. We have to look to make sure that we actually have the resources that you're looking for, or that the work that you're planning or proposing to do can be done here. Once it passes the feasibility stage, then it goes out to an external review panel. We assign a minimum of 3 reviewers, and they review your proposals based on scientific merit. They give it a score from anywhere from 1 to 5, with 1 being the highest. Any proposals that get an average between 4 and 5 don't typically get time here. Okay. Allocation, that's when we notify you that your proposal has been accepted and that we've allocated some time. It is based on the recommendation of our proposal review panel. And then the scheduling is actually between the user and the facility. They will contact you, or they will ask you to contact them. We'll give you who your point of contact is when we notify you about your allocation. And we'll give you the contact information so that you can call them to schedule your time. Okay? Now these are the deadline dates for our proposal submission. We typically have the deadline 3 months before the cycle actually starts. We have 3 different cycles throughout the year. Once your proposal is accepted, it is valid for 2 years or 6 consecutive cycles. So the deadline, if you're requesting additional time, is different than when you're submitting a new proposal. These are all on our website, by the way. So this is the ratings guidelines that our panel go by. Later this afternoon, Jay is going to talk about some recommendations on how to write an effective proposal so that you have a better chance of scoring high and get time. Our acceptance rate here at the CFN is still high, but as Emilia pointed out this morning, our projects are getting bigger and bigger. There are more proposals that are being submitted, so the competition is getting higher.
So what is the rate of acceptance roughly these days?
It's still high. It's right around the 90%. Yeah. So safety, safety, safety. We can't emphasize safety enough. So for each proposal, you are required to submit what we call a safety approval form, where you identify the chemicals that you're going to be using, the materials that you're going to be bringing, and our safety coordinators will review those safety approval forms to make sure that we can accommodate those chemicals and materials, or that we have the proper controls for them. We also have to make sure that whatever waste is produced by your experiment, we can dispose of them appropriately. For any experiments that present unusual risk, we recommend that you contact our safety coordinator, who is Bob Sabatini, so that he can ensure that there are proper controls in place, or that he can make recommendations, maybe change the chemicals or materials that may be similar that you can use for your project if the initial materials or chemicals that you're planning to bring we can't accommodate. For some experiments, they may require a safety review. Like, for example, if you're bringing biological materials, they can take, several months to complete, depending on what type of biological materials you're bringing. And once your SAF is approved, it's valid for 1 year. So in the course of a proposal lifetime, you may submit 2 SAFs. Okay? So your proposal is approved. What do you do next? So in order for you to work here at Brookhaven, you have to have a valid guest appointment. So you have to submit or complete a guest registration form. And it's during this process that Brookhaven ensures or checks that your institution has a user agreement in place. Your guest registration will not be approved until that user agreement is received by the Guest User Visitor Center. So once they get that, then they'll push through with approving your guest registration. Nowadays, guest registrations are typically approved within a week. It doesn't take long as it used to be. So it's more important that we make sure that you have your user agreements in place. Training courses. There's lots of online training courses that you have to take depending on the facility or the instruments that you're using. You can take a minimum of 3. Sometimes it can go up to 6. There are some instruments that require medical surveillance. For example, if you're using any of our laser systems here, you are required to get an eye exam and be approved by our medical department. By the way, we will reimburse you for the cost of your eye exam, our user off as well. Okay. Our training modules are available online. They're all online courses, so we recommend that you take them before you come to Brookhaven so you don't waste your time doing these training courses before you can get into the labs. And the very last thing is the CFN Operation Safety Awareness training that is done once you come here on your first visit. It actually gives you an orientation on the lab, on the tools, And you don't get badge access or what we call access to the labs until you've completed that. Okay? So how do you get into the labs once you've done all of that? All access to the labs are controlled by the badge. And we don't give you access on your badges until all of those parameters are met. So your proposals have to be active or valid. Your online training is up to date. You've completed your COSA training, and your safety approval form is approved. There is no piggybacking. By that we mean if two of you are working in the labs, one can go in and the other isn't, you can't open the door for that person to come in. You have to come to the user office so that we can update your badge access or tell you why you've lost your access to the lab. If you do that and we find out, you may lose your rights to get into the labs. So, we have what we call after-hours access. We are not a 24-hour facility. We are only operating Monday to Friday from 7 to 6. So any activity that happens outside of those hours, we have to look on a case-by-case basis. We do have a lot of after-hours users here at the CFN, and we do that because we have no safety personnel who can monitor activities during those hours. So what are your responsibilities as a user? So we expect that you keep your guest appointment valid so that you don't lapse and you don't lose access to the CFN. If you publish, and we expect that you would publish if it's non-proprietary, we would like you to inform us of that publication. And we would like you to acknowledge that the work that you've done was at the CFN also. So there is a blurb that we require our users to use in their publication. And because we are a DOE user facility, we are required to provide feedback to DOE on how our users are doing, if they're happy or unhappy. So there is a certain user satisfaction form that you have to fill out. Keep your training and your safety approval forms up to date. And we want you to observe all BNL and CFN rules and regulations. This is the contact information for the user office. We are typically the first people that you see here when you come to the CFN. If you have any questions or if you have any concerns, call us. We'd be happy to answer all your questions. If we can't, we certainly will refer you to the right individual. Any questions?
For each proposal, how long is it valid?
2 years.
For 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then the gap between from the time you submit and then the first time you can use
It's 3 months.
Yes, 3 months.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
Other questions?
Is that 2 years of use, or is it a certain term of use within 2 years?
You have 2 years to finish a project. So you can submit the proposal now, it get accepted, use it for the first cycle. You may not need it for the second cycle and then come back on the third cycle. So you have 6 consecutive cycles that you can come.
Also during the 2-year period, not all equipments are probably available. Sometimes there can be multiple users.
That's right.
So then how scheduled?
When your proposals get allocated, there are emails that go out to each individual PI telling you what's available to you and what is not.
But even for each day and
For the whole cycle. Let's say from January to April you submit your proposal or you submit your request for additional time. You will get an email from the user office telling you what tools are available to you during that 4-month period and what is not. You know, you may, let's say for example, you request the clean room and then you request the SEM. You may get access to the SEM but not to the clean room. That will be all in the email that you get.
but even during the time, aren't there multiple users actually using that same equipment during the
No, there's a scheduling. Each facility has a schedule that you have to follow. The clean room has what they call a Google Calendar for each of their tools. And that's where once you get trained in the clean room, you have access to that calendar and you can schedule.
I think now they switch to different system. Now they use...
Oh, it's the FOM?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
But the point is that you can't just show up.
Yes.
Every piece of facility or expertise is scheduled. And so that negotiation goes on with each of the facility group leaders or the facility contacts. And so you will know before you arrive which day, week, month you can have access to a specific piece of equipment.
Usually there's no more than 2 hours per day on one piece of equipment.
Depending on the piece of equipment, the unit or the quantum of time can be an hour or 2 hours. It can be half a day. It can be a whole day. And in some pieces of equipment, it's multiple days that are the single quantum, if you will, of time allotted.
Type of equipment.
Exactly.
Yes.
There's a question back here? Yes.
Yeah, so I guess in the proposal, you also anticipate the time that you need for the use of pieces of equipment.
Well, I'll talk about that later on today. For every request for facility, we request that you put how many sessions you anticipate needing. And a session could be an hour. A session could be a day. A session could be...
That's that quantum that you're talking about.
It's exactly that quantum.
But I guess our question is how close to that request versus what's allocated to you?
So I also will talk about that. And so the key behind that is talking to the point of contact. People very frequently will just say, oh, I think I'll need 50 hours. Who knows? And the most likely allocation could be 3 hours. And so part of writing an effective proposal is speaking to our CFN staff to know that if you write a 50-hour request, that means that A, you didn't talk to us, B, you don't have a good idea of what's necessary, and C, you might be a little off on understanding what is necessary to do the thing that you're wanting to do. And that will necessarily drop the way that our external panel will necessarily evaluate your proposal. Because the external panel is quite knowledgeable on each of these pieces of equipment and will be able to diagnose whether someone has a good sense or doesn't have a good sense of what's necessary. Yes?
Curious, how do you select the external panel?
The external panel, our facility leaders, our group leaders, they recommend them to our director, and he sends out the invitation to them to serve on the panel.
Okay, so they're nominated by the staff.
I'm sorry?
Candidates for the external panel are nominated by the staff.
Yes. I can also add that just recently we've established an external panel review for both proprietary and non-proprietary proposals. And so those for proprietary proposals, that panel is established to keep strict confidentiality on the review of those proposals. And so that panel differs from the non-proprietary typical academic review panel that we have. Yes?
The WFO work for others, I would expect someone here will be writing the proposal based on inputs from industry. Is that how it works?
Work for others is generated by someone external to CFN.
But
So
timing,
you would do it.
But the timing that it would take to do the work, the resources needed would be...
That would be negotiated with someone internally with CFN, but we would not drive the writing or the generation of that work for others proposal. We would certainly work with you to help establish the appropriate amount of time that would be needed to try to execute that. But work for others, almost always is generated by an external person. Doreen, please.
Yeah, one thing that didn't come up in Mike's presentation is the fact that
I'm sorry, could you say that?
I'm sort of impressed that the council works with large, but one thing that wasn't mentioned in Mike Curie's presentation was the statements of work for work for others, is those statements of work are actually also reviewed by DOE.
Yes. Last question.
Yeah. If let's say if I want to use a TN, some TN facility, but I don't have any previous, my student, none of us have any knowledge about TN.
They will train you.
Then,
They will train you.
so I see. Or is it, because I think in that case, very specialized equipment, can the staff here sort of help?
Oh, yes,
during the
yes,
time?
yes.
Yes,
That's
in fact.
why I mentioned that you have access to the tools and to the staff's expertise. Yeah.
Somebody will let you read.
Right. Right, we won't say, hey, take this $10 million piece of equipment and just go wild. We won't do that. So
Can it work in some kind of whether in collaboration mode as well, or if let's say if I can just send something to the staff and then can the staff do the work?
They have done that. They
but
have done
we
that.
don't tend to encourage that.
Yes, we don't. We want you to come here.
Right.
Yeah.
Usually they train first time when students come. First they train, and then they let students work by himself, but the facility members somewhere around.
Right.
And after that you have to have something like exam, or you have to convince your trainer that you can work by yourself. Only after that you will be allowed to work independently.
Right, it depends on the level of sophistication of the equipment, but generally speaking, for most of our facilities, if you send a graduate student or a postdoc or research scientist, we'll train them on how to use that facility, and to the point where they'll be a more or less independent user. Okay, so the last question.
What's the typical time for the review and approval after the submission? And the other thing is there a limit on the number of users on site per proposal?
No. Typically, we try to finish review allocation within a 10-week period from the time that you submitted your proposal. I'm sorry?
10 weeks.
10 weeks. 10 weeks, yes. And then there is no limit as to the number of users on any proposal. But they all have to have a guest appointment at Brookhaven.
All right, let's thank Grace again.
I just want to say, if you have any questions during the course of the day, the user office is just down the hall, so feel free to stop by. We hope to see you here as users soon.